Witness the colossal boxing showdown nobody expected, live on Netflix. International superstar Jake Paul, the sport's most watched fighter, takes on Britain's two-time unified heavyweight world champion and Olympic gold medalist, Anthony A.J. Joshua, in the most dangerous and defining matchup of their careers. This is Judgment Day. Watch Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua, Friday, December 19th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, live on Netflix.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite, obey your thirst.
Every Who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton. But where to get great prices on gifts, they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one Who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and low prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as Who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
Hello, it's Martin here, and before we begin, I wanted to let you know that this episode of How We Are the Podcast is sponsored by LiveScore Bet, a proud principal partner of Sunderland AFC. And if you're looking to get started, LiveScore Bet have got a cracking welcome offer for new customers. All you've got to do is bet £10 on sports and get £30 in free bets. It's as simple as that. So, if you're ready to join the action, make sure you're doing it with LiveScore Bet, the home of total betting. This offer is available to new members only, and you need to put a £10 or more bet on sports within 14 days of opening your account. Free bets are valid for 7 days, £20 to use on Sportsbook, £10 on Bet Builder. T's and C's and deposit exclusions apply. Please bet responsibly, and remember it's for over 18s only. Now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to How We Are the Podcast, sponsored by LiveScore Bet. It's Martin with you, and today we've got something a little bit different, because in this episode of the podcast we are celebrating the career of Gary Rowell. As everybody will know by now, on the eve of the Derby game last weekend, news filtered through that Gary Rowell had passed away at the age of 68, exactly 50 years to the day that he made his debut for Sunderland. Gary Rowell is an absolute Sunderland legend. He lived the dream we all had as kids and played 297 games, scoring 103 goals, including a hat-trick against Newcastle, and left Sunderland supporters of all generations with some absolutely fantastic memories. I've got Kelvin and Andrew with me here today. And Andrew, you and I recorded a little bit to tag on at the start of the matchday preview podcast on Sunday. And even though neither of us saw him play, he's somebody who we were brought up knowing about, brought up singing about. I was thinking back earlier, I remember a lad at school when I was young. You know how kids go, oh, what was your first word? What was your first word? And you go, I don't know, like dad or something. He goes, do you want to know what mine was? I was like, what? He goes, Gary Rowell's magic, Peter Withers tragic. I'm like, you were fairly well advanced, mate, if that was your first words. But the sentiment, I guess, is that we were kind of brought up on the magic of Gary Rowell, weren't we?
Yeah, was that mate of yours, was he on his way to like the top set or something? Was he on his way to like additional lessons with the teacher or something because he was set aside as a gifted child?
You know, he absolutely swore down those were his first words, and his academic performance was completely the opposite of what you might have suggested there. So, you know, but anyway.
It proves the point of exactly what you're saying about we didn't see him play, and yet we know he's just like we're talking about a bona fide club legend here, aren't we? You know, just some of the most famous photos in Sunderland AFC history are of Gary Rowell doing stuff. He was put in the Hall of Fame in 2020. His dad had been on the books at one point at Sunderland in the 50s. So yeah, we are talking about like Mr. Sunderland, and we're all fans of the historical side of the club. If you look at the front cover of the Absolute Record, the Players Edition, there's only a handful of players on there. and one of them's Gary Rowell. We are talking about the very, very top of Sunderland history, and I would have loved to have watched him because, yeah, the stories you hear just suggest he was top class.
Now, Kelvin, you did see him play a lot.
I did.
So for those of us who didn't see him play, myself and Andrew included, and I'm sure lots of people listening didn't see him play in the flesh. What sort of player was he? How would you describe him? Who would you even compare him to? What was he like to watch?
Do you know, I've was talking about this with a friend who's similar age and experience to myself after we got the news that he'd passed, you know, and he reminded me on that I used to compare him to Martin Peters, who played for England in the 1966 World Cup. And West Ham.
That doesn't really help the modern day younger football fan. But
well,
it's a good
I'm gonna steal a line from Chris Wynn here. I hate young'uns, me. So the reason I use that as a reference is one, for the older people, the older fans that did see him play, because he's quite hard to bracket. You know, folks say, "Oh, Gary Rowell scored all these goals. He must have been a fantastic forward." And if you read a lot of tones, a lot of the texts will describe him as a goal scoring forward. I don't think he was. I think he was an attacking midfielder, and I think that's where he saw himself as well, as an attacking midfielder, a lad that could play in midfield but could get forward and score goals. In today's parlance, what would he be? A number 10, a number 8? He'd be flying about in them positions today, I think.
Yeah.
And he quite often, he was two-footed, but I got used to seeing him when he was playing in midfield on that left-hand side of midfield. So good passer, good engine, really good eye for a bit of space, and either giving the ball into a bit of space or drifting into it himself. He was I think the expression is he had an ability to ghost into goal-scoring positions, you know, and could lose his marker. That was the kind of player that he was when he,
Yeah, he was born in Seaham in 1957, on the 6th of June, and he came through the ranks of Sunderland with some pretty impressive players, Kelvin. And I think he's 18-year-old. He first started coming into first-team consideration, and it was a testimonial match at Roker Park in November of 75 that the Roker Park crowd got their first glimpse of him in a sort of first-team.
Yeah, we did. It was Bobby Park and Richie Pitt's testimonial against Dutch team Wearside 67. And it was a testimonial. You know, it wasn't a full-blooded contest, but we did get a look at him. And some of those people that he came through the ranks with played in that game. The likes of Mickey Henderson, Jackie Ashurst was one of the older players that he came through with, and he actually played in the centre of defence with Jackie Ashurst in that game. Bobby Mitchell he came through with.
Yeah.
There was a lad called Peter Stronach who got some games and played, and then younger players like Tim Gilbert, Sean Elliott, who we became really good friends with, and Kevin Arnott were youth players who we did spend some time playing with. But he played in that game. He played in the centre of defence, and we did get our first look at him, and just picked out a couple of things that the press had to say about him. And alongside Bobby Mitchell, John Donahue from the Journal, he said both the bright young prospects made the best of their 90 minutes. And then, just talking about Rowell in particular, he said, looking full of promise and never once looking out of place, operating in the back four alongside Jackie Ashurst. It wouldn't be too long past that game before we're getting a glimpse of him in real live action.
No, that's right. And, Sunderland were flying at this point of the season, weren't they? They were top of the league. And Andrew, he came in a month later in December 1975 for his debut against Oxford United from the bench.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about the belief they had in Gary Rowell that he was brought in this particular match. It wasn't the best of games, seemingly. The pitch was covered in snow. Oxford had turned up at Roker Park and were playing like ultra negative football. The team were missing Billy Hughes and Pop Robson through injury, so they were lacking a bit of quality. I mean, we'd only just lost heavily at Southampton, so there's all these like areas where nerves could be creeping in, and yet there we go in the 71st minute. He comes on for Mel Holden. The game's 0-0 at this point against Oxford. It's a big call by Stokoe to bring him in, but he's thrown in at the deep end, but doesn't let anyone down, doesn't look out of place. The press are saying things along the lines of he showed enough to suggest he'll be getting more first-team games. Just basically going on from that friendly game that yourself and Kelvin have touched upon. And what a situation for a Sunderland fan to be on the park when Porterfield scores like a vital late goal to sneak us a 1-0 win. He's grown up watching Porterfield play, and now he's part of the team helping him along to get an important winner. What a debut that is for the lad.
Can you imagine, as a Sunderland supporter, you've watched this fella score the winning goal in the FA Cup final, 2.5 years earlier, and then you're coming onto the field for your debut, and that player who scored the winning goal at Wembley gets the winning goal in the 1-0 win in your debut match. Kelvin, that's the stuff dreams are made of for a young lad coming through. It must have been a dream for Gary Rowell.
Absolutely brilliant. I mean, that period joining the club as an apprentice for the start of the 72-73 season, just what a time to be coming into the club. Just fantastic period to be joining the club and coming on, as you say, for Port to get that goal. He must have been living the dream, man.
Unbelievable.
That 72-73 season, it's confirmed in a couple of books. He rang in sick from youth team duty so that he could go to games in the first team's cup run. He was so determined to watch the team play that he was scuppering his own chances of getting to play for that team. I mean, that's support.
That's commitment, isn't it?
I just love that story, mate. I love that story, mate. Brilliant.
And of course, these were the days that there was only one sub, so the fact that Gary Rowell had been selected to be sub for this Oxford game is kind of testament to his ability. He was an unused sub on a couple of other occasions as the months progressed. But he made his first start away at Oldham at Boundary Park in March 1976, a 1-1 draw. I think, Andrew, he played a part in the goal that we scored that day.
He did, yes. I mean, again, there's no room for error in these games. He's not being brought into the team when they're playing dead rubbers. We're in the thick of the promotion push. We go to Oldham. He is selected to replace Tony Towers, who is another quality player. Towers had been out injured. Dennis Longhorn got the spot. And then suddenly Gary Rowell is seen as a better bet. So again, this is the levels we're talking about as a kid. He's not just getting a game for the sake of it. They really believe in him. But yeah, at Oldham, we go 1-0 down to an early goal. We equalise fairly quickly after through Billy Hughes. And it's all through Gary Rowell's good work, Martin. He pinches the ball high up the pitch. So Regis Lebris might have found a spot for him because Sunderland like to do that nowadays. He's won back possession and then just very calmly squared it to Billy Hughes for that equaliser. So he is really integrated in the team and a big part of it, even in those early days.
And it was only a month later we scored his first goal for the club. We played Hull and we won 4-1. Gary Rowell got a goal from 35 yards. When you read the reports, it sounds as if the keeper should have saved it. It kind of trickled through the goalkeeper, but he got off the mark for Sunderland on that occasion. And of course, the team went on to win promotion. So he's a young player coming through, and it's not, as I said, it's not a situation of a kid being thrown into a struggling team or a mid-table team looking for some inspiration. This is a team that is doing fantastically well, winning games, winning promotion, a good squad with England. And like Tony Towers was an England player, and Gary Rowell's coming in to compete with those sort of players, and he was getting his games. So, again, it just tells you everything you need to know about his ability and how highly rated he was coming through that season, Kelvin.
He was so unfussy, on the pitch. And one thing I was going to say about his scuffy goal at Hull, which I actually saw. I was at that game, and what an away day it was. But his scuffy goal at Hull is a great example of, when Gary Rowell shot, he usually got it on target. I'm not saying he never missed, but if he was anywhere near the goal, you could usually guarantee that it's going to be close if he gets a go at it. So what's that old adage? If you don't shoot, you don't score, and get the ball on target. I think Ali McCoist's always shouting about that. You have to get it on target.
Yeah,
he usually did.
The following season was a little bit difficult. Obviously, Bob Stokoe left the club after a few months. Gary Rowell had kind of been on the periphery of things. He'd made a handful of appearances, but hadn't established himself in the team at all. But Ian McFarlane came in as caretaker. He gave him a start or two. And Jimmy Adamson came in, and he really established himself during the course of the season. He ended up making 36 appearances that season. So from a young player coming through, who's kind of dipping in and out of the team in that promotion winning season, for the next season to come in and play that amount of football, it's quite remarkable. He scored 5 goals, and 4 of which were in a spell of games, Kelvin, where the scorelines were 4-0, 6-1, and 6-0 in a string of 3 home games in a row, wasn't it?
Well, it's still one of my favourite ever times to be a Sunderland fan, that. Partly exacerbated by how dreadful things had been prior to that. We'd been on a drought of goal scoring. I think it was a record-breaking drought. We'd never scored a goal. We'd never won a game. I think we were 11 games in. And what I will say is Gary Rowell was getting his game in that team in really, really pressurized circumstances, and there were other players with more experience who weren't handling it particularly well. And I think there's always something there about a young player coming in and that into a period like that. They're either fearless or the fold under the pressure, and he really presented as just fearless. He was so I know I've used that word, but he was so unfussy when he got out there and just played his game. It was fantastic in that spell. The 4-0. It started with a gritty 1-0 win against Bristol City on a dire Friday night. But I tell you, Gary Rowell played really well that night, and it was what I call dock rat stuff he was doing. He was winning the ball and just passing it off. Yeah. One of the things I really liked about Gary Rowell, he was 2-footed, and the ball was always moving. It didn't matter where it came to him. The ball always moved, and usually forwards. He had that lovely little knack of left foot, right foot. It doesn't matter. I can lay it off. And he played really well on that. It was an unusual Friday night game, miserable night, but 1-0. And I thought, I'm walking out thinking that'll do me. And this young lad will do me, unbeknownst the 3 games in a week, 4-0 against the Borough. And what I will say is it did sort of herald the start of a trio that got to be called Charlie's Angels. Those 3, Kevin Arnott, Sean Elliott and Rowell came into the team. And I think in a way all 3 of them were fearless, and they galvanised the rest of the team with their performances. It was fantastic to actually be around and see that. And, with reference to the times we're in at the moment as Sunderland fans, that was what it was like back then. It was like now. You could hardly believe what was happening and how the team were playing and how these young lads just came in and handled that situation. What you couldn't fail to see if you were a student of the game, you honestly couldn't fail to see that Arnott, Elliott and Rowell could all play together.
Yeah.
They knew each other's games and they played really, really well together. It was fantastic. 4-0, 6-1 against West Brom and 6-0 against West Ham. And in that period, you're right, Gary Rowell scores 4 goals, all different, but all, and I bet you people that watched him play a lot would say, that's a typical Gary Rowell goal in the box. And then when he scores out with the box, that's a typical Gary Rowell goal from out with the box,
Yeah.
And then when he puts a header in, you're going, that's a typical Gary Rowell headed goal, So we got really used to seeing him do this stuff over the decade. Brilliant period that, and he was big part of that fantastic period. We almost did it.
Probably a funny time for Gary Rowell because he's established himself in the team this season. He's scoring goals in the top flight, but it's not quite enough as the club get relegated that season, don't they? But the following season, he is pivotal. He is now a first team regular. He is part of the team. And, what age would you have been? Maybe 20, 21 at this point? Next season, 77, 78, he played 39 games, scored 18. So you almost going at 1 every 2 games, which for a player who wouldn't be described as a striker is remarkable going, really, isn't it?
He seemed to have the brief to get forward.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what lineup we were playing. He seemed to have the brief to get forward, but I'm not sure whether. I think it would have been really hard for a manager to stop him from doing that. It just seemed to be part of his psyche, this ability to drift into these positions unmarked and to get forward and support his forward line. Just seemed to be part of his psyche.
Yeah.
When he was playing with Kelvin and Andrew, Arnott certainly knew his game and would quite often. Some of those drifts into positions, it would be Arnott that was flicking the ball off to him or pinging a pass to him. He really did have his game and his the style of which he played his game off to a T.
The following season, the 78-79 season, that includes a game he's probably everybody will know that he scored a hat-trick against the Mags, 4-1 win at St. James's, 24th February 79. And Kelvin, could it get much better than that? Maybe if it was in a Champions League final against the Mags, it might have been slightly better, but it doesn't get much better than that, does it?
Well, I sort of feel a bit of a curmudgeon for saying this, but there were people on the bus on Sunday who were saying to me, it doesn't get much better than this. And honestly, I was sitting there thinking, it does. 4-1, my God. It was just the young lads that day were great. I mean, the whole team played great. Don't get us wrong. But the young lads that day, Mickey Henderson, who came up with Rowell, had a great game. But Gary Rowell that day, he just terrorised Newcastle all day. He could have scored 4. He could have scored 5. He actually missed a chance that he ordinarily would have put away in the first half. I think it was just before he scored. That keeper that Andrew's always an admirer of, Steve Hardwick, he made quite a good save, got out to him quite well and saved it quite well. That was fantastic. It was fantastic, Martin. A great game, and he put in a fantastic performance on that day.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
After the match, Gary Rowell said, "That's the first time I've ever scored against Newcastle. I'm the happiest player alive." And even Bill McGarry, who was a Newcastle manager, you can't imagine this today. Bill McGarry raved after the game, according to the press. He said, "This lad is worth a lot of money. He's got something that no coach can ever teach, the knack of getting goals." I don't think you'd have a Newcastle manager or a Sunderland manager in the reverse situation kind of pouring praise on the opponents after such a heavy defeat. But Andrew, there was a good story, wasn't there, in the aftermath of that game? Gary Rowell, obviously still a young lad. The press are all converging on him, wanting to get a sound bite for the paper. And Gary Rowell ended up inadvertently, I think, creating a few headlines in the aftermath of that game.
Yeah, well, there was actually two good stories, because you know how you say it doesn't get much better than 4-1 against Newcastle. And by the way, not only did he score the 3, he set up the 4th for Entwistle, and very possibly the ball would have gone in anyway had Entwistle not intervened. And seemingly after that goal, when him and his good mate Kelvin and Andrew were about to kick off, they apparently looked at each other and said, "Do we go for a 5th here, or do we just take the piss?" Which, come on, that's pretty funny. But yeah, in the game afterwards, obviously everybody's hassling him, wanting interviews. There's no such thing as a press officer to guide him. One of the papers comes up to him and says, "Gary, would it be fair to say that this means more to you because you hate Newcastle?" And he's just replied, "Yeah." Yeah, just, it probably shrunk his shoulders. It was like, I'll go with that. Of course, he's being quite genuine there, but it then gets blown up in the Sunday papers as this, massive negative story. One of those where it's true, but I don't know, maybe not the wisest thing. That said, he was kind of set up there. He's not come out for no real reason, slagging people off left, right, and centre. But yeah, there's a bit of a kick-off about that. And then on the Monday, back at training, Ken Knighton, the coach, just says to him, "Listen, the gaffer wants to see you in his office." So he goes up there to see Billy Elliott. He says here, "I explained what had happened in a roundabout way." And then he asks, "Am I in trouble?" This is a book by Rob Mason, by the way, so, the full story's in there. So am I in trouble? Billy said, "No." I'll give the full quote. "No, I fucking love it. I think it's great. Get out and finish your training." I mean, that'll do for us, won't it? You've not only got the hat-trick winner having a bit of a laugh about it, you've even got Billy Elliott, the manager, joking on and getting involved. So, we've been talking recently about how Sunderland got the derby at the weekend and seemed to understand the pressures of it a bit more. Well, back then in February 1979, I think Sunderland did exactly the same on that occasion as well.
And, he's 22-year-old. He's scored all these goals, scored a hat-trick against the Mags away at St James's. But only a few weeks after that hat-trick, Andrew, there's a game against Orient. Sunderland win 1-0. Gary Rowell gets a goal, but in the last minute, he gets a knee ligament injury, I think, which kind of sets a different course for the next maybe 18 months or 2 years for him, doesn't it?
It does. It's one of those classic examples of football can have you feeling 10 foot tall one moment. And then, it was literally exactly a month after that famous game against Newcastle. It's a home match against Orient. And he gets this horrific knee ligament problem. He'd actually scored earlier on in the game. It was the only goal. We won 1-0. That was his 24th of the season. And there's still a load of games to go. So he was absolutely flying at that point. But it means he misses the run-in under Billy Elliott. And for me, looking back on it, that was a major factor in us failing to get promoted. Kelvin, were you at that famous game at Wrexham, our final game of the season when it all went?
I was at the Wrexham game, and it lives in the memory for all the wrong reasons. Other than I thought as a fan group we handled the disappointment quite well. But I just wanted to say I was at the Orient game where he got injured, and that injury, when he got it looked a bad one in real time. When a player goes down, he was actually carried from the field right at the end of the game. And I did think that it affected the way that we were playing on the run-in. I think we'd been really flying. And my memory says 2 losses and a draw derailed the run-in. We just missed out, but it derailed the run-in to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, we actually beat Wrexham in our final game. It was results elsewhere, and it was one of those seasons where we played our last game, but other clubs still had matches in hand. But you're right, in the build-up prior to Wrexham, I seem to think we might have even gone top and then lost at home to a poor side, and we just couldn't break them down. The name of the team escapes me, but yeah, probably the classic match where, had Rowell been available, he does his stuff, he unlocks that stubborn defence, and
that's what we lost, for creativity. He could unlock a defence.
Yeah. But yeah, it impacts us that season. The following season, Ken Knighton gets the job, and we do get promoted. And it's a season that, in general terms, you look back on and think, hey, what a great time. But throughout that, Gary Rowell, who's a fan favourite, is actually struggling with injury. He's in and out of the team. I mean, he does score a goal from the penalty spot in like an early season Anglo-Scottish Cup game. But that is it. I think he makes single figures for league starts. That famous game in the League Cup where we beat the Mags on penalties in St James's Park. I mean, who do you want to take a penalty at St James's Park? He's already shown he can do it. But sadly, he'd been taken off. He'd been substituted in the actual game itself. So doesn't take a penalty. We then go to Wembley Arena, and I think he misses that. I don't think he's part of the five-a-side team that wins that Daily Mail Cup. Now, again, Gary Rowell would have been the ideal player for that format. So there's all of these brilliant things happening. And bless him, as a Sunderland fan, he's watching from the sidelines, missing out. I wonder if that impacted his mental health as much as his physical health.
I think one of the things he says about this period is he feels, possibly looking back on it, that he tried to come back too soon. He wasn't fit. He wasn't match fit. And because he wasn't match fit, he was getting other little niggles and knocks during games. It was slowing down his recovery, and it actually slowed down his game. I always felt when he came back, one of the impacts was he didn't trust his right foot. It was his right knee, and I always felt he almost didn't trust his right knee, his right foot to do business. But that's it would be a personal observation that I haven't watched his game before the injury. He really I think he does feel that he tried to come back too quickly.
Yeah. Well, Martin will agree. I'm sure it's just testament that even after those issues, he comes back.
He does.
Oh,
yeah.
He absolutely. Once he gets through that season, when you kind of look at it, and obviously we're looking at it with the benefit of hindsight, but that season immediately after he suffered that injury, he does start in the team, but he only makes 8 league appearances that season. But the following season, he comes back and he plays 26 games, scores 10. The season after that, he plays 30 games, scores 9. The season after that, he plays 34 games, scores 16, including the hat-trick against Arsenal that we talked about on one of the On This Week podcasts, maybe last week. 83-84 season, he plays 31 games, scores 8 goals. So he's obviously got back to a level where he can play well, score goals in top flight. He's able to maybe get more trust in his body to be able to play those games. And those figures, when you look back on it just as a set of figures in terms of appearances, it kind of looks as if he came back and was able to perform still a very good level.
And was for top goal scorer in all those seasons, and joint top goal scorer, I think, in the last one with Colin West. But he does get back to a decent level, and is a threat. Just a little sidestep about technology's penalty taking. He was the penalty king, wasn't he? It was great when he was in our team and we got a penalty. You knew that it was gonna hit the back of the net with him taking it, but he did miss one, and you don't happen to know when that was. There's always a little question, lads. Anybody know when he missed his one penalty?
I don't.
An annoying writer called Andrew Smithson has written about this, I'm afraid, on the website. So
I knew you were going to say that.
I'll bow out. Not fair. I've had inside information on that one.
Inside information. He did miss it at Orient, but he'd scored a goal. To give him his due, he missed the pen in the 14th minute at Orient. Was that 77, 78, I think it was. And when it was the first season he started taking his penalties. And
he must have been
he missed it. He just, what a bogey team, definitely. But he missed the penalty, he just put it past the post. And but he scored in a mad 3-minute spell where 3 goals went in. The game finished 2-2 each. It was bonkers. But he did score another typical Gary Rowell goal in that game. I think Bobby Kerr put the cross across for him and he put it in with his head at the back post. So, little sidestep there. Sorry, lads.
Martin, the goal that I think changed things as he was making his way back from injury. There's footage of it online. We're back in the top flight. It's September 1980. That season, as you have quite rightly said, he finished as top scorer. But even then, he was having a couple of spells and a couple of relapses where he was in and out of the team. So to finish top scorer back in the top flight, given those circumstances, takes some doing. The goal that kicks it all back off again for him after that long period where he doesn't score is at home to Leeds United. As I say, September 1980. We win the game 4-1. His header is actually scuffed in. It kind of hits his head and his shoulder at the same time. But it just struck me how pleased everybody was for Rowell that he scored this goal. I've got a couple of snippets from Bill Bradshaw, who's been on the pod previously and was writing for the Journal at the time. He speaks about the game and he interviews people. Ken Knighton was delighted in the goal. He said it was the one that won the match. Rowell himself said, it was a great feeling when my header went in. It was as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and now I want to stay in the team. I've scored for the reserves during my spell since I was injured, but it doesn't compare with this. So it means a lot to him. Bradshaw says quite fittingly, as Kelvin's mentioned, it was Kevin Arnott that supplied the cross. These two good pals, they've come through the ranks together. Rowell's laughing and joking afterwards, and he says, yes, it was nice that Ozzy set it up. It's about time, because I've been waiting for him to do it long enough. So, he's joking about it. But yeah, Pop Robson talks about it. He was involved in the game. He scored that day. He's chuffed to bits. I just think that again, it's another thing that speaks to what a popular and likable lad he was. He was a great footballer, but he was appreciated by the fans and his teammates because of his character as well. And they were just thrilled because they could see it was important for the team that he was back scoring goals, but they were pleased for him as well because he was just a quality bloke.
Yeah, no, that's right. So as you say, he had this spell of 5 seasons where he was in the team a lot. But Andrew, as you quite rightly say, there were spells that he was missing out. The stats I read out earlier, 30 games, 34 games, 26 games, 31 games. They're league games, by the way, and starts. But, you're talking about seasons in which you might have 42, 44 games. So he's missing a chunk of them, but he's still playing a massive part. Obviously, everything changes when Len Ashurst comes in to replace Alan Durbin. He does start off in the team when Ashurst comes in, but very quickly he kind of seems to make his mind up about him or disregard him. He scored his last goal for Sunderland was away at Watford in Len Ashurst's third game in charge, and he played his last game away at West Brom. It was a 3-1 defeat. He comes on sub for Gordon Chisholm, but that's kind of it. And his career at Sunderland seemed to kind of peter out very quickly once Len Ashurst was appointed as manager, which seems really strange as a Sunderland, Sunderland legend himself. Ashurst, whether you want to call him a legend or what, you can debate until cows come home. But somebody who's played so many games for the club, understands the club, you would have thought he would really appreciate somebody similar from the area who understands the club, who's played the games. He's still only 26.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say, Martin. It wasn't like we're talking about a 30-plus-year-old that was on his last legs.
No.
He was 26 years old. It was as a fan at the time watching, it was a very bizarre, odd decision.
It's always really intriguing to me because when you read up about players who left before you got to see them, there'll often be a lot of really nice things about them, and then it'll just be summed up with, and he left in such and such a date, or he moved to so-and-so. And you have to go digging for the reasons. I would have loved to have known the fan reaction at the time. March 1984, you can see something starting to build because in the press, he's being referred to as being out of form. Now, that fascinates me because it was just the law that Gary Rowell was top scorer every season, whether he was playing every game or not, like Martin says. And it felt to me really harsh looking back on these newspaper comments because at the time, the team was struggling in general. And I got the feeling that Gary Rowell wasn't off form at all, but just people were used to him digging the team out of the mire all the time and expecting things of him that just weren't possible. This is the same period when Alan Durbin gets dismissed, and there's a lot of fallout about that. The Alan Durbin era a lot of people think was a missed opportunity and the club pulled the trigger too soon. There was suggestions right from the off that several senior players were unhappy about this. And I wonder if Gary Rowell got dragged into this purely because he was an experienced member of the team. There's never any quotes or anything from Rowell speaking out of turn or not welcoming Ashurst or having any sort of problem with him. But there's undertones of other players being disgruntled. Leighton James was apparently quite disruptive. Leighton James was working as a coach at the club at the time and knew once Ashurst came in, that was going to be the end of that. I get the feeling that just by association, Rowell was dragged into that, and maybe a new manager at the club, he wants to stamp his authority, he wants absolute control, he wants his new men around him. Rowell's a casualty of that. He does play in Ashurst's first 6 games, but then he's unused. He's on the bench a couple of times and unused. He's brought on in a game, but it all peters out for him. And those final couple of matches when the team are fighting against relegation, he's not even putting Rowell in the squad.
Yeah.
He, as Martin says, he's made his mind up very quickly. And it's really sad when you think about that, because one of the best talents at the club, and he's been discarded. We do stay up, and he doesn't leave until the following season. He leaves early on in August 1984, but it had been on the cards that he was going because it was announced in the May that he was going to be given a free. And I've got a couple of clippings here from the time that just, they fascinate me. The day it's announced, the Hartlepool Daily Mail, which basically was lifting word for word what the Sunderland Echo was saying at the time. They were like sister newspapers. Gary Rowell, Sunderland's most prolific goal scorer since Len Shackleton, has been given a free transfer. It seems staggering that hard-up Sunderland can afford to release a player they turned down $500,000 for 5 years ago, and who has finished leading goal scorer in 6 of the last 7 seasons. With the players leaving early today for an end-of-season break in Spain, Rowell was not available for comment, but manager Len Ashurst said, "I feel that the right decisions have been made. We need a fresh outlook after striving for success over the last 4 years. It is not about cash, but who is hungry enough and wants to play for the club. I have 12 months to prove I am the right man for the club, and what I want is honesty." Now, I don't know if that's directed at Rowell himself or just one or two of the other players who were put on the transfer list there, but that's heavy. That's pretty heavy stuff. And then the following day, having previously said that it's not about cash, there's a bit more of an in-depth analysis of it in the Chronicle on the 15th. And it says it was strongly hinted today by manager Len Ashurst that the decision was made because they wanted to offload big wages to help pave the way for a big signing. So there's a little bit of conflict there. Dealt with horribly. Rowell was not offered a new contract. The decision meant he wasn't going to get a testimonial, despite having been at the club for over 12 years as a youth and as a first teamer. I'll come to that in a second. Ashurst said, Rowell has given excellent service to the club and scored a lot of goals, but he will not get a testimonial match. A free transfer gives him the opportunity to get a healthy financial deal elsewhere, so that is a way of looking after the boy. But just the way it was dealt with was appalling. Because he was flying to Mallorca with the players, the club didn't make him aware of the decision. A letter was sent to his house, but after he'd gone on the flight to have a couple of days break with the squad. Just come on. I mean, somebody like that deserved better treatment. It touches upon his injury issues impacting him. But the club, as a goodwill gesture, agreed to give him a monthly contract just until the opportunity of a new club comes along.
Yeah,
So they didn't throw him on the scrap heap officially, but they did. That line about the testimonial's interesting because some sections of the fan base strongly believed that the club didn't want to give him a testimonial. You've got Tom Cowie in charge. His era at the club was dogged with issues and accusations of him being tight with money. Len Ashurst, as Martin says, was like a club legend. But as a manager, there was a lot of queries around it. And I just think Rowell, bless him, he said the right things. He said he wasn't ready to leave, but that he'd been told by Stokoe all those years ago that, like, thin skin won't get you far in football. And I just think, that's really, really sad end to his Sunderland time.
No, it is. I think it's important to kind of put some context around that notion of the free transfer maybe being equivalent to a testimonial for people who are used now to a contract expiring and the player being allowed to move for free. So back in the day, your contract would expire, but the club would still hold your registration, and you couldn't go until another club had agreed a fee for your registration. So even though you're out of contract, you weren't allowed to move. So the fact that the club had given them a free transfer, in their minds, potentially, don't want to do the testimonial, don't want him to stick around for another year, don't want the hassle and the money of all of that going to him. But potentially that, if they're not demanding a fee, Gary Rowell's has the ability to potentially get a better deal from the club he's joining because they're not having to pay a transfer fee. And you look at some of the clubs who were linked with him. So, you've got this scenario here of, however Sunderland wanted to play at the time, but this lad, 26-year-old, had scored 103 goals in 297 games, a lot of them in the top flight. He had the likes of Arsenal, Man City, Man United, Forest, Coventry, Wolves, Newcastle, Luton, and Norwich, of course, who he went to join eventually. They were all linked with him. That was just in 3 or 4 reports I pulled out from the time that he'd been given the free transfer. I'm sure others came and cropped up and other names cropped up, but Brian Clough wanted him at Forest. Brian Clough recognised as a bloody goal scorer. And you imagine Gary Rowell, from what you've described him as, Kelvin, would have been a brilliant player for a Brian Clough Forest team.
Yeah.
Eventually he goes to Norwich, and I'm not sure the background to that decision, but he struggled badly with injury. I think he got injured early on. His knee suffered another injury very early on at Norwich. And he goes on to play only 6 games, scoring 1 goal for Norwich in that season. And of course, we played them in the Milk Cup final, didn't we? And Gary Rowell, I think last week, Kelvin, you talked on this week pod about Gary Rowell and the ovation he got from the Sunderland supporters at the end of that Milk Cup final game. The week before, we'd played Norwich at Carrow Road. We'd beat them 3-1, which everybody kind of thought was a prelude to what was going to happen at Wembley. Gary Rowell came off the bench for Norwich that day and actually played against us at Carrow Road. But that was, that was one of only 6 games he actually managed for Norwich that season.
Just terrible looking back on it. It doesn't sound great. It's not a great exit for a player of his caliber. Being there around at the time, it was sort of mystifying and really quite annoying. Even though I get the point you're making about the free transfer, it was quite often seen as a gift to the player. We'll just let you go, off you go, get yourself a deal organised. We're doing you a favour there, is the way that could be presented. And I think for some players, but I'm more thinking about players that are in their 30s and coming to the end of their careers. This lad was 26 years old, and with the calibre of performances that he'd given to the club, it just was mystifying. There were a lot of fans were mystified by that at the time. It's even worse looking back on it, but at the time, they were scratching their heads and going, what's going on there?
Kelvin Andrew mentioned earlier that we turned down, one of the paper reports said we turned down a £500,000 bid a few years earlier. Can you remember who that was from?
I am going to say to you that I think that was Man United or Liverpool. I've got one of the big Northwest clubs in my head, but I couldn't say 100% for sure. It wasn't the first time that I'd been sniffs, that you were getting indicators that, if we throw some money at it, can we have this young lad? But it was the three lads were chased a little bit on it. Elliot and Rowell were chased by the bigger teams. Yeah.
And again, contextually, that £500,000 fee would have been huge at the time.
Huge.
I don't think the £1 million barrier would have been broken at that point. So you're talking British, almost getting into the realms of British transfer record fees around that time for this. So that again shows how highly rated he was in footballing circles.
It does. The fact that Kelvin believes it was two of the real big guns who were wanting to buy him, and then when he's released, you've rattled off all the clubs that were linked. That just leads to further question marks as to why Sunderland were happy for him to leave. I mean, this is a celebration of a great player.
Yeah.
So I don't want to bring that. It's a tricky one, but I do think it's worth talking about because there's all these clubs lining up desperate to sign him. He's apparently no longer suitable for Sunderland. Come the end of the season, man, we get relegated.
Yeah.
So like I say, it's a celebration, and Gary Rowell's time at Sunderland was amazing. It'll never be forgotten. But we see this a lot, don't we? That even with the biggest stars, the end is so disappointing and damaging for everyone in this instance.
No, that's right. And look, his career does kind of fizzle out, I guess, to some extent. It's certainly when you look back on his career, the very best bits happened early on, didn't he? He comes back to the north with Middlesbrough, 27 games for them, 10 goals. Then he has a spell at Brighton. I think he's on the bench against us in the 87, 88.
He does. He comes back for that game. Yeah.
Comes he has spells at Dundee and Carlisle and Burnley and hangs up his boots in 1990. But he had a bit of a second coming with Sunderland, didn't he, Andrew? As some people do. But he came back and he was commentating on the radio. A whole other generation of supporters who didn't see him play and didn't have any recollection of his playing career became really familiar with him because he was sat alongside Simon Crabtree describing the action every day. And of course, this is an era. It's not like now where you get a stream or you can watch most of the games. You can find the pictures to watch. For the vast majority of games, especially the away games, we were all reliant on Gary Rowell and Simon Crabtree describing the action to us. So for those years, he became a really pivotal part in our Sunderland experience, our day-to-day of Sunderland. He was writing columns in the Sunderland Echo. I was digging through some fanzines earlier, and the Wearside Raw fanzine that Tom Lynn did. Gary Rowell's got a column in that every issue, talking about something going on at the club. So he was really heavily involved during that period for a number of years. And he was, again, a voice at a different generation, or a person, different generation, inextricably linked with Sunderland and grew to love because of his commentary.
Definitely, that was my introduction to him. And as you say, this was in the context of a very different era. I was starting to go to a handful of away games, but pretty much my routine, if I wasn't there, I was at the home games, I was going to one or two on the road, but every other week I was listening to Gary Rowell for 2 or 3 hours in the build-up and the commentary of the games, talking about the club. He loved Sunderland so much. Now, given the way he left that we've touched upon there, he could very easily have thought, nah, that's it, I'm walking away from this club and I'm never going to give them a second thought. But he didn't do that because he was a fan and it meant so much to him. He was actually quite astute as well. On the radio, he was funny. He made me laugh a lot. He made me laugh a lot, but he wasn't one of these who just slagged the players off and just said, Sunderland are crap. He had very interesting points to make about the team. He articulated them well, but with that element of humour. And it just, all these things just were always so apparent. He apparently, in the last few years, he knew he was in poor health. He couldn't travel up to games, but seemingly all he ever did when he was on the phone, he spoke to Rob Mason a lot, and Rob was talking about it on BBC Radio Newcastle. He would want to talk to Rob for hours about the game and the club and what's happening at Sunderland and what did you think of the match and all of this. Just through everything, he was desperate to still follow Sunderland. And as a supporter, I recognised that in him. It was so obvious. And for a player who's had a career in the sport and could have well been jaded, that was amazing to see. Just what a guy. And another thing, if you flick through programmes of when he was playing for Sunderland, what a snappy dresser he was. He was a sharp dresser. When there was photos of him in the programme, like meeting supporters or doing an awards night or handing out prizes or whatever, in his civvies, he was a star. He was smartly dressed. He'd have shades on. He just looked like the man. There's no surprise whatsoever that he was a terrace hero. But having said that, he wasn't a big head either. He didn't go for the limelight. He was a down-to-earth fella. He was a family man. I mean, I remember on the radio, he would often talk about one of his sons who were in a band. He just He just spoke about his family with as much passion as he did about the club. Seemingly, I heard one of his old teammates say that if ever he was invited to do a talk-in or do any sort of like meet the fans, he'd be well up for doing it, but he wouldn't accept payment. He just enjoyed meeting fans. He didn't want the limelight. He wasn't looking for attention. He would just say, listen, if there's a fee, just give it to charity. What a guy. Just what a brilliant player and what a nice person. It's really sad that he's passed. But over the last few days, just the warmth he had has come out and been clear for us all to see.
And it's those memories, isn't it, Kelvin, that, you've obviously lived through them. Andrew and I live vicariously through you and through the things that we read and videos that we watch and all that sort of stuff. But a hugely important person in the rich tapestry that is Sunderland AFC.
Yeah. It was great, though, to get the little bit from Roker Report's fashion guru there. It's very important not to miss these moments. But he was a snappy dresser. I agree with you. For him to be a dyed-in-the-wool Sunderland fan and to play for the club you support, I cannot imagine how that must have been for him. I probably can imagine it, and I felt really jealous. He's like living. He's absolutely living a dream. To have started his journey when he did, that period, that 72, 73, magical period for the club that he starts his journey. Fantastic. One of the stories I always liked about him was, he scored the winning goal against Liverpool in 1983, I think it was. He scored a penalty against Liverpool in 1983, and he was asked after the game, somebody said to him, how good did that feel? And his response was, good, but not as good as beating the Mags in 1979. I mean, this guy just draws you in if you're a Sunderland fan, doesn't he? He just draws you in. And you mentioned, Martin, one of the things for me, having seen his first game and saw his last game, you kind of grow up with these players. We've talked about other players like this and the kind of sense that it gives you of, you feel like they're almost extensions of your family, But a very personal memory for me was the 1985 one, the Milk Cup final. I've never forgotten that in relation to him. The final was lost. our team hadn't really turned up on the day, and we were beaten. They'd beaten with that hollow and numbing feeling that follows like an experience like that was just beginning to descend on the whole of the crowd in the ground. And to me, I always feel it was like he sensed that, and he grabbed that cup and he walked across to us with a Sunderland scarf draped across his shoulders. This is a Norwich player, and he presented that cup to his fans, and I'll tell you honestly, it lifted the whole of the support that day, and it was he was very emotional when he did that as well. It was like he got that chance, the chance that he wasn't allowed when he left to sort of acknowledge us, and it was a chance for us to acknowledge him in the stadium there, in the National Stadium. It was a fantastic moment and a great memory for me at the time. I think the respect and esteem that Sunderland fans have for Gary Rowell comes from, it actually comes from quite a simple place. I think we see him as one of our own. He is one of our own. He's a local lad who supported the team he got to play for. He lived the dream of just about every young Sunderland fan, certainly this young Sunderland fan growing up. He never took that for granted. He never forgot his beginnings or his roots. He repaid us and the club with goals and performances that will stand the test of time and live long in the memory. And that, for me, that's the stuff of legends.
Brilliant, brilliant stuff. And I think that is the perfect place to end this celebration. As I say, it's a celebration and look back on Gary Rowell, a genuine, bona fide Sunderland legend. So thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you. Been a privilege, and I hope we've gone some way to just showing what a great man and a great footballer he was.
And thank you for everything, Kelvin. That was a beautiful ending there, and very well thought through. But your memories bring this to life, and this is why these things are so important and so good to do, because we can read things and make our own assumptions, but to listen about somebody like Gary Rowell from yourself who saw him play, we could talk for 5 or 6 hours on that Newcastle game, never mind anything else. But thank you very much for sharing all of those with us and the listeners, because they're fabulous.
An absolute privilege to be afforded the platform, Martin. Number one is Gary Rowell, and we all live in a Gary Rowell world.
And that's the perfect place to end. We'll be back tomorrow on How We're the Podcast as we build up to the game against Brighton. But until then, it's goodbye from us.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.